Hi friends, welcome to my channel. I'm Sarah Martin with the Contoured Chemist. Today we're going to be talking about Seint IIID Foundation in particular, and how do you know if you have the right highlights? How do you know if you have the correct colors for your face? It can be a little bit tricky. So I'm going to kind of explain to you what you need to be looking for. If you're having any of these issues, what could be causing them. We're going to talk a little bit about troubleshooting 3D foundation highlights. So if you want to check it out, please keep watching. Be sure to hit that little subscribe bell, and thanks for being here. Okay, friends, we're going to be talking about how do you know if you've been color matched correctly? How do you know when your skin has changed? Maybe the seasons have changed. Maybe your skin in general has changed. I know I've learned a lot from wearing this makeup of how often our skin changes, and you might never have realized it until you start wearing 3D foundation. I can tell you from experience, it can be difficult to know if you're wearing the right shade. I wore I say wrong shade because it's probably wasn't my best option for years. I understand. How do you know? How do you know if that's your best option? It's can be hard to tell unless you understand what to look for. And so I'm going to be going through a bunch of different troubleshooting things that if you've experienced any of these things, your shades might need tweaking. Your skin might have changed. You might need an additional shade in order for you to be able to get a better look, more dimension, better longevity, more skin-like finish, whatever your goals might be, whatever your preferences might be. There are a lot of nuances to this makeup. Because it's not a liquid or a powder foundation that you just kind of put on all over, it can be harder to understand why your skin right under that color matters so much, why it makes a difference, whether you're putting one shade all over or you're really paying attention to, okay, but what about the particular area of my face I'm applying that color to? And so I'm going to kind of explain that in a little bit more detail so it's easier to understand, since it is very unique. This makeup is unlike anything else you've tried. Okay, first things first, if you are new to 3D foundation, the highlight shade is what you would think of when you think of the foundation, all right? Even though we have multiple shades within our foundation, the highlight is what we consider like your all over color foundation, concealer, brightener, all of it in one. The tricky part is that usually people don't just use one shade. It's very rare that someone can, in my opinion. Why? Because most people do not have one color on their entire face. If you really truly look at my face, and I feel like it's something I didn't realize until I became an artist and I started studying faces. Like, my face is not all one color. If you can look, my nose is darker than here. I've got redness that goes all the way over here. I've got dark spots. I've got depth here, but my under eyes are lighter, even though I have a lot of spots within that. My forehead's lighter here. I've got some redness here, chin here. My jawline's a little bit lighter than my neck usually, but I've got a lot of dark spots in there too. So like, I do not have a perfectly even skin tone, and I find probably 85 to 90% of my clientele does not either. And that's okay. That is completely normal, especially if you have more mature skin like I do. But you have to realize when you're switching to 3D foundation, that means one color, one and done is not going to necessarily give you the look you're seeing on social media from artists. I use 3 highlight shades in order to give myself the best coverage, the best longevity, with the least amount of makeup possible so that it makes me look younger, never older or cakey or emphasizing anything I'm trying to not emphasize. So yes, I wore the wrong color for years and it didn't look bad. In fact, I had no idea that I was wearing the wrong color because it still looked great. And so you could be wearing this foundation for years thinking, I love this, this is great, but maybe you're still not getting your best possible look. Maybe you see other people and like, well, my makeup just doesn't look as good as that person's. Sometimes it's a little tweak, a little addition of a color, because maybe you can't see the differences on your face like somebody that's been trained to can. I know it took me a long time to figure out my skin is not one color. Why am I putting one color all over my face? So if you are new to 3D foundation, or maybe you've been wearing it for years, just this past year, we've added a ton of colors. And so even a lot of my longtime clients have been getting rematched because there might be new colors that'll work better for them. So reach out to your artist and make sure that you have the right colors. I know I always tell my clients, anytime you think your skin might have changed, anytime your highlights maybe not laying as well on your skin as it used to, let's revisit it. Send me your selfie, natural light, and what colors you currently have and what kind of coverage you're wanting. Because I take all of those things into account and I'll explain why as I go through every one of these things, troubleshooting wise. I am a big believer that people can wear multiple combination of highlights of this makeup. You will not just have one color match that can perfectly work for you. In my opinion, everyone can wear multiple shades depending on what you're wearing them with. So whereas I wear this shade to color correct, I can wear this shade or this shade as a main, depending on if I've self-tanned, and then I can wear this shade or this shade to brighten. But I never can just wear one shade all over. It just does not work and give me the look I want after seeing the results I can get from multiple shades. It is a combination of these colors. It's not designed to just match your skin perfectly because no one's skin is one color all over, okay? So that being said, you can always adjust your shades. Little tweaks can make a big difference. When seasons change and your skin is changing color, you might be getting lighter, you might be getting darker. Most likely you will have to either tweak your application of the shades you have, or you will have to switch to a lighter or darker shade for at least one of your colors, sometimes two, depending on how much contrast, depending on how much your skin is changing. Okay, first things first, the biggest issue I see with highlight shades is being matched too light. This can account for usually 90% of people's issues is they're matched too light than that point of their face. So this is the color I wore for years, all right? Okay, this and this are now the shades I'm wearing. So one of the biggest issues is a color not blending. Usually if a color doesn't blend, it's too light. Now I can get this color to blend on me, but if you zoom in, what happens when you get to an area of my face that is darker than my jawline? I either have to apply a large amount of this, which that dipping in was way too much product. I would never need that much for just a small area of my face. But it emphasizes the texture. I'd have to use a lot to cover that redness. But you look at it and you're like, but Sarah, that doesn't look bad. Okay, sometimes it's going to be more obvious. This is not my color because in a couple of hours, I will see this redness on my chin start showing through the makeup, okay? I even can sometimes see where the makeup looks like it's breaking up or separating, all right? That is a sign your color is too light for that area of your face. If you apply a color on an area, so I already have pores there, but let's say I'm applying this. Do you see how it's doing nothing? It's not giving coverage. It's not making my pores look any better. If anything, it's emphasizing that area of my face. I'd have to keep loading on product in order to get it to sit well on the skin, okay? If it's emphasizing texture that's not already there, say you're applying, like I have a lot of texture right here, applying a color and you're like, whoa, like I didn't realize I had so much texture on my face there. That's usually a sign your color is too light. If it's emphasizing texture that's not already there. Now, you can't expect any makeup to take away texture of the face unless it is super thick and like fills in, if you will. That's a completely different type of makeup. This makeup is not going to do that because it will still let your skin show. It's going to look natural. It's going to look like skin when you're finished, not heavy, I call it mask-like, okay? It's not gonna fill in anything, but it should never increase the look of texture. It should never make your pores look more pronounced. Your wrinkles look worse, your dry skin look worse. That's, again, a color issue. That's always too light. A darker color will never emphasize the look of texture. I think it goes without saying that if I was to apply this shade all over my face, I would feel very washed out. A lot of times what I see is when the undertones of the color are off, it can wash out. So sometimes it's just the wrong color at that undertone. Like I have charts for my artists when I'm teaching them. Have different highlights at the same depth and different undertones. It might just be the wrong undertone for your skin. For example, some people have a lot of red in their neck. Some people have a lot of yellow in their neck, and you give them a color that doesn't have any warmth, for example, and they have a lot of warmth. Yellow on their face is going to pull them very yellow, or gonna make them feel very washed out if you take away all the warmth from their face when their neck and chest has warmth. It's never gonna look balanced. And in my opinion, balance is what we're going for. We're always wanting to make sure your tones are balanced. You know, even though if you get good coverage, that doesn't matter if you look off. I call it floating head syndrome, when your head doesn't match the rest of your body, right? We want to avoid that. So if you're feeling washed out, it might not be too light. It might just be the wrong color for you, or the wrong combination. You might just need an additional color to correct and add that warmth so that you don't get washed out with just one shade. I see that a lot. Another one I see all the time is people saying it's too yellow or too warm. I have yellow undertones. Both of these are yellow, but they are way too yellow for me. Why? Because it's not the right combination. This shade is notorious for everyone saying it's pulling them too warm, which is very possible if you're using the color by itself and it's not a combination. When I use this to color correct, I have to use a more neutral shade to keep myself matching. And so I can't just use it by itself, even though it matches those darker points of my face and gives me great coverage. It will pull me too warm on its own. Again, a lot of times it's not just that one color that you're looking for, it's that combination. And sometimes it has to do with the application method, even your brush choice. And if you pick a brush that tends to pick up a lot more product, then it's gonna apply that color heavier, okay? So one of the things is you will never see these colors on your face look like they do in the 10. If I put this color on as dark as it does in the 10, that's 100% opacity. These are extremely pigmented, where they should always be used so very little that they look completely different than in your 10 or those photos online. They don't look like that. They shouldn't. And if they do, you're applying way too much of your color. Again, if you're needing to apply a lot of a product, then it's the wrong color for you because you're using too light of a shade as well. Here, I had to use a lot of product in a couple of hours. This will be disappeared or broken up and I'll see my redness. One of the biggest things I hear is that something's not giving them enough coverage. And it's because they're using like a shade this light and trying to cover either redness, dark circles, broken capillaries. You'd have to use a lot of product. Not every one of these colors is good at color correcting. Now, there's a big difference between somebody's face who has very little contrast and someone has a lot more contrast like I do. Like I have redness, I've got hyperpigmentation, I've got blue and purple dark circles, my entire nose is darker. I have a lot of contrast in my skin, meaning there's a big difference between the lightest point of my face and the darkest point of my face. One of the biggest differences between our cream makeup and other foundations is that if you don't match those darker points with a shade that is at least that dark, if not darker, to correct it, the makeup will break up, separate, and not last all day. And trust me, as a chemist, I have looked at the formulations and the ingredients of our highlights. They're all more or less the same, but you gotta understand the pigments that are put in this color versus this color are all gonna be in different combinations, right? This has a lot more probably titanium dioxide to give that white. This one has less. There is a reason though, even though the ingredients might look similar, the ratios are not the same. And I've noticed that it doesn't last the same. It's just the nature of these creams that if you're applying a shade too light, your entire face will look like you have no coverage by the end of the day. And I've seen it time and time again with my clients that sometimes just tweaking one shade darker makes the difference between all day wear and no longevity at all. And so know that you have to match those darkest points. And so if you have more contrast, you are going to need a color corrector. I call a color corrector a shade that will correct that area of your face that you're looking for and that matches your darkest point. It's as simple as that. How dark is the darkest point of your face? I'm gonna look at that point first when I'm color matching you. And if you have a very even skin tone and no areas of concern, meaning you don't have dark spots or dark under eyes or redness or scarring, anything that is a color issue, I'm not talking about anything other than color on your face. There's a difference in color between here and here. If you don't have any and it's very, very low contrast, you won't be given a color corrector. Now, if your entire face, maybe you don't have any issues, but your entire face is darker than your neck, and I see this a lot. You just have a naturally lighter neck, which makes sense. The sun, your chin will shade that area. Usually people's necks are lighter, right? But you want to match your neck. You cannot wear the shade of your neck on your face. It will wear off. It won't last. And so you would need a color corrector, whether it's correcting redness or not, it's matching the color of your face. And then you would have to use a lighter color, usually more neutral like I do, in order to tone down the color corrector, bring it back down to matching this. And that's the hardest part for people to grasp sometimes, that you can't just apply this color all over and think you're gonna get all day wear. It doesn't work that way. It's a little confusing. Understand, if your makeup is not lasting all day, it can be two things: the wrong color, or you're using something with silicone, mostly silicone based. So when you're trying to figure out if it's just too light, think of how long is it taking you to go through a 10? If you're having to go through a 10 of your color in a month, 2 months, depending on how quickly you wear makeup, I go through one every 4 months, and now I'm using 3 shades, but you use very little color corrector, you'll use more of your main shade, and you'll use very little of your brightener shade, okay? Now, I always say, also pay attention to your face. Where is the color wearing off? If it is wearing off all over, and that includes your contour, you have silicone in something under your makeup. And our makeup, silicone gives a very silky, smooth glide to the skin. It makes your skin very soft. It's a very it's added to things as a textural thing. The problem is it is added to almost everything nowadays. So it's not a bad ingredient, but for Seint makeup, it is not good under the makeup. So check out your SPFs, check out your moisturizer if you need it. With this makeup, you do not need a primer with the correct shades. After almost 7 years of being an artist, I can tell you, you don't need one if you're matched correctly. If you are having to use a primer and then apply the makeup and then set it with a lot of powder in order to get your makeup to last all day, you're matched too light. I will take that to my grave. I've seen it time and time again. If you're wanting to be able to apply the least amount of product, a color corrector can be your best friend. It completely changed the way I wear this makeup. So I want to show you guys the difference. So on this side, I'm going to use my color corrector. This is an undertone that will actually correct redness, dark circles, hyperpigmentation, scarring, all of the things. So for me, this will match the darkest points of my face, of my rosacea, so that I can use less of that main foundation shade. I don't want to have to cake it on to get coverage, and I don't want any of this to break up through the day. So I'm gonna use a very light-handed brush, and I'm gonna use a very small amount of this product so that I can just match those darkest points. I showed you earlier how dark this color was, but if you use very little and you buff it on the skin, it won't be too dark or too warm. Now, your color corrector is designed to be at that level of depth or darker. So if it is darker, don't freak out. That is what your main is for, and even your brightener. Some people need that brightener, especially if you have a lighter neck naturally. You're not gonna be able to match without a much lighter main shade than your face and a much lighter brightener to bring in those light undertones. So I did apply it before my contour. I have hyperpigmentation. If I don't, those dark spots show through the contour and make it look unblended. Also, it makes my contour pull red because I have rosacea. Your application methods completely depend on your face and the coverage you're wanting. So if you're not getting the coverage you want, sometimes it's because maybe your artist didn't ask. Like, I feel like there's a huge difference in the way I color match someone that wants very natural coverage versus full coverage. You can't apply the makeup in the same way. Your application method is going to be different. Your colors might even be different. And sometimes people are shocked that they feel like they're not getting enough coverage. They're loading on all this main shade and they're having issues with creasing and transferring on their clothes, wiping off, looking oily through the day. And I match them darker and they're like, no way, this is pulling me too dark. If you're applying a shade too light heavily, what happens? It's gonna look more like it does in the 10. It's not gonna match your skin. It's gonna be sometimes pulled too dark. People are shocked that sometimes you're like, no, you actually need a darker shade to use very little of, and then you can use a main shade that's not gonna pull you too dark. It's gonna actually neutralize that darker shade, allow you to use far less of both of those. Most of the time, if you're looking oily, if it's transferring, it's always over application. The number one reason for over application is you're using a shade too light or that can't color correct what you're trying to get coverage on. And so it's like this balancing act, and it's confusing because it's, again, not like traditional makeup works. So again, if it's not lasting in just certain areas, you most likely sometimes people just need a color corrector there. Sometimes people just have red noses. Their noses aren't lasting and they were matched to the area of their entire face and they just cannot put enough product on to get that to last. Well, guess what? That color will never last on a bright red nose. You got to color correct it first. Then you might be able to use that shade over it, stay matching the rest of your face. Suddenly you have all day wear. But you have to be able to recognize whether your face has contrast or not. And it's one of those things. I never realized how many people have that until I started studying faces, and most people do not have one color across their entire face. Our faces just aren't made that way. And if you stayed out of the sun and wore SPF your whole life, you might, or gotten a lot of lasers, you might, but majority of us have not. I wish I would have though. Okay, so now I can just quickly apply my main over it. We'll kind of tone down that warmth because it's more neutral. It's gonna allow me to get coverage and actually get my nose to match the rest of my face. Okay, and suddenly I have a very even canvas that I can then contour and brighten off of. And my under eyes will have coverage. A lot of times it's just simply the under eyes that people aren't getting coverage on. And that's because they have more depth there and they're trying to use a color that matches the rest of their face. Under eye color correctors are the most used, I'd say, with this makeup. You just have to match the darkest point, and then you can go in with your main and even it out. And then you can use a brightener, because what happens when a shade is too light, it emphasizes texture. We tend to have the most texture there. If you go straight in with your brightener without correcting first, it's never gonna cover that darker shade. It has too much of that white pigment, not enough of that darker pigment that will give actual coverage. Those lighter pigments just do not give coverage over dark points of our face. You'll notice they look chalky. They make your skin look dry, emphasize that texture. Most of these lighter shades in our line will never be used for your full face unless you're using a corrector first. It's very rare that somebody is that light. Even the fairest skin tones I have matched need corrections somewhere. because most people just don't have any areas of their face that have no darker pigment. Okay, I went ahead and contoured. I'm gonna show you what this shade looks like. So you can see the difference. Okay, I brightened, and I am going to finish both sides the exact same so you can see the difference. Okay, friends, so I finished up my look. No blush, no bronzer, because I feel like that's one of the easiest things when you're washed out feeling. You could add that and it's gonna look good. It's not gonna change your longevity though. So hopefully you guys can kind of see the difference in coverage, and I'll show you what it looks like after a few hours. I feel like my nose is my biggest thing, where it looks textured here. I can still see a lot of dark points and redness, a lot of depth still under my eyes, a lot of dark points through my contour and down here that normally are corrected, but it doesn't look bad. This is what I'm saying. Sometimes it's like right away, it's not. This is why I wore the wrong color for years. It doesn't look bad. It still looks far better than my previous foundation, but can it be better? Absolutely. So you might be having, you know, way worse issues than this. It honestly depends on how off the colors are that you're wearing. And it might just be a tweak in the combination. Say you're only wearing one highlight shade. That could be the main reason why. Maybe you need multiple colors to kind of balance it out. Maybe the seasons have changed. You just need to be rematched. Remember, if it's not blending, enhancing pores, fine lines, texture, more so than what it looks like on bare skin. And most importantly, not all day wear, not great longevity, not giving you the coverage you want. If you truly want full coverage, or maybe it's just you want more coverage on certain areas of your face, pay attention to where it's wearing off. You can even tell your artist, like around my nose, under my eyes is not giving enough coverage. Now, if it's all over, that means either your main shade is off, or you need a color corrector across a majority of your face, which is not rare. It is actually quite common. Or if your entire face is just wearing off and your neck's not even lighter, it's just completely off, you might have silicones under your makeup, which I have lots of recommendations for silicone-free products if that's what you're looking for. All those other things, you need a new color match. So I will put my link for my color match. I rematch people all the time that are still having issues with their shades, want a second opinion, want a very in-depth match. Mine are in depth. I will warn you on that. So just know that I'm doing it so that you have all the information and you understand why, instead of just being like, oh, here are your highlight shades and that's it. No additional information. I wouldn't want that, and so I'm not gonna give that to you. You will have loads of information. That way you can use it as you're trying your makeup for the first time. You will understand why you're applying the certain way you do, where you need to apply what to. I'll mark up your face so that you understand where your darkest points are, where you need each shade. And of course, I'm always in your back pocket to help you troubleshoot. That is my job. And I'm very confident that with the right color combination and the right help, everyone will love this makeup. I have no doubt in my mind, anyone could wear it as long as you are willing to try some suggestions in order to get it to work for you, because everyone likes different preferences. Everybody's skin is different. And so we kind of have to tweak things here and there to get it to work for you. But this makeup is the biggest game changer if you're wanting it to look like skin without loads of product. It's just all in that magic of the highlight shades. The highlight is where all the magic happens, in my opinion. So if you are needing help with your colors, I am happy to help you out. I will put my color match request in the drop box below the video, as well as the pinned comment. Just fill that out. Tell me everything about how you like to wear your makeup. If you've already tried it, that is fine. What colors were you using? What specific issues were you having? Was it everywhere? Was it certain parts of your face? The more detail, the better I can help you troubleshoot. And as always, if you have any questions, I'm happy to help. Just drop them in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you next week. Love you.